My father once said I was born as the backup plan, a safety net for the family if my golden boy brother ever slipped. It was meant as a joke until the whole world heard it. A clip from our family podcast went viral overnight, and suddenly I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was a punchline for millions. They laughed, and my family laughed louder, but what they didn't see was the quiet fire it lit inside me. I promised myself someday they'd regret underestimating me, and that day was closer than anyone imagined. My family's life looked perfect online. Weekend barbecues in our pristine backyard, my father flipping steaks while my mother laughed beside him, Nathan holding court with a beer in his hand. They loved filming these moments, polishing them into 30-second reels for Instagram. Our living room became a stage, our kitchen a set. And like any production, the camera knew its stars, and I was never one of them. In every frame, I was the accessory in the background. Sometimes holding a tray of lemonade, sometimes arranging flowers, sometimes just there blurred at the edge of the picture while my brother took centre stage. It was a role I'd learned to play since childhood. Smile, stay quiet, don't outshine the golden boy. The night of my 33rd birthday was no different. Balloons in gold and silver, Nathan leading everyone in an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday, the camera panning smoothly to capture his charisma. I stood there, smiling, holding the knife, pretending not to notice that the lens didn't care about me. After the guests left and the cameras were off, my mother leaned in, her hand soft on my shoulder but her voice like ice. "Claire," she said quietly, "you need to support Nathan more. That's your role, remember?" It wasn't cruel in tone. If anything, it was said with the casual certainty of someone reminding you to take out the trash. But it landed like a weight in my stomach. Later that night, we exchanged gifts. Nathan unwrapped a set of keys to a new Tesla, a reward, Dad called it, for his vision and hard work. My gift was a thin package. Inside was a worn leather notebook, no card, no explanation. "Thought you could use it to jot down ideas," Dad said vaguely, already looking at Nathan again. I smiled because that's what I was trained to do. But in my head, something shifted. 2 weeks later, we were filming an episode of Family First, the podcast Nathan started during the pandemic. It was supposed to be a wholesome family show, stories, advice, a touch of humour. We were recording in the living room, cameras rolling, mics live, when the conversation turned to family roles. Dad chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Nathan is the pride of the family," he said warmly. Then, without missing a beat, he added, "And Claire? Well, she's our backup plan." Everyone laughed, including Nathan, including Mom. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? But inside, my chest felt tight, my face hot. The episode went live the next day. I didn't think much of it until my phone started buzzing. Then buzzing again. And again. The clip had been posted on TikTok, then reposted, and reposted again. Within 24 hours, it had 12 million views. The comments section was flooded. "Backup plan sister, that's hilarious." Every family's got one, Claire. Imagine your own dad saying that on camera. Hashtag backup plan sister started trending. My name became a punchline in strangers' jokes. I sat alone in my apartment, watching the numbers climb. A part of me wanted to turn off my phone, crawl into bed and disappear. Another part, one I barely recognised, felt something else, a quiet burn. They had made me the joke, but I wasn't going to stay the punchline. The next morning, an email popped into my inbox. A daytime talk show wanted to interview me. My first thought was naive. They'd seen my design work, maybe? My blog? But no. The subject line made my stomach drop. Interview request, life as the backup plan. The interview request sat in my inbox like a bad joke. Life as the backup plan. I deleted it without replying, but the story had already gained its own momentum. Every time I opened social media, there I was, my face frozen mid-laugh, my dad's voice on loop, saying I was the backup plan. Family group chat was oddly quiet until Nathan messaged, "Hey, don't take it too seriously. This is great publicity for the podcast." I typed 3 different responses and deleted them all. A week later, I was at the family house again. Nathan had invited a few investors over for a casual dinner. Over steaks and wine, conversation drifted to startups. I saw my opening. "I've been working on an idea," I said carefully. "A platform that connects freelancers to micro-investors, kind of like a crowdsourced incubator for small projects." Dad smiled in that patronising way that could almost pass for warmth. "That's interesting, Claire, but startups need leaders. You've got creativity, sure, but leadership, it's not really your strength." The investors nodded politely, their attention already back on Nathan. I swallowed the sting and smiled. This was a familiar dance. Nathan's own startup was floundering. He'd overpromised, underdelivered, and now his investors were getting restless. But my parents weren't worried, not publicly, at least. "This is just a rough patch," Dad told anyone who asked. "Nathan's a visionary." Mum took charge of the PR campaign, flooding social media with cheerful updates. Photos of Nathan at speaking engagements, videos of him working late in the office. Never mind that half those photos were staged. And me? I became the silent support, writing press blurbs, editing videos, drafting emails Nathan didn't even read before sending. I didn't mind helping, at least I told myself that. But somewhere beneath the surface, I could feel the resentment growing like mould in a damp room. One evening, while Dad was out, I needed to send a press kit and couldn't find the latest files. His iPad was on the kitchen counter unlocked. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Among the folders of marketing materials, one was labelled simply Q3 Strategy. Inside, a neatly organised document laid out the family's PR plan. Bullet points, talking points, crisis management scenarios. And there, halfway down the page, was a section titled Claire. Positioning public image. Sympathetic, but non-threatening role. Humanising backdrop for Nathan's brand. Talking points, loyal sister, self-deprecating humour, backup plan, narrative. Goal, reinforce Nathan's genius by highlighting Claire's humility. I closed the iPad, my hands cold. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a prop. Cliffhanger 3. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop seeing the words. Sympathetic, but non-threatening. It felt less like a description and more like a cage. The next blow came faster than I expected. I got a call from a number I didn't recognise. The man on the line introduced himself as an attorney representing a group of disgruntled investors. "Your name appears on several of the company's documents," he said. "We're pursuing damages for misrepresentation." My stomach dropped. "What company?" He hesitated. "Nathan's, Matthews Innovations." I laughed, a short, humourless sound. "I don't work for Matthews Innovations." "You signed as a guarantor," he replied. I confronted Nathan that night. "You used my name to raise capital?" He shrugged like I was overreacting. "You're my sister. It was just paperwork. You trust me, right?" The worst part wasn't even his audacity. It was how calmly Mom stepped in, smoothing the situation like it was a minor misunderstanding. "Claire, you really should read what you sign," she said gently, as if I were a child. "This is a learning opportunity." A learning opportunity. I wanted to scream. Over the next few weeks, my role shifted. I wasn't just the backup plan anymore. I was the scapegoat. Whenever Nathan's name came up in negative press, somehow mine appeared too. Family associate Claire Matthews. Sibling involved in oversight. At dinners, Dad would sigh and say, "If only Claire had been more careful." I stopped arguing. Words didn't matter. In their story, my role was already written. One night, after another tense family dinner, I stayed behind to help Mum clean up. She stepped out of the room to take a call, leaving her tote bag on the counter. I don't know what made me look. Maybe curiosity, maybe desperation. Inside, I found a stack of neatly organised envelopes, bills, receipts, and one letter addressed to Nathan. I slipped it open. "If your venture fails, we'll shift public focus to Claire. It's cleaner that way. She's already in the narrative. We'll protect the family name. You understand?" My hands trembled. My name wasn't just a prop now. I was insurance. Cliffhanger 4, I slid the letter back into the envelope, my pulse pounding. For the first time, I realised the truth. They weren't just underestimating me. They were preparing to sacrifice me. The legal mess dragged on for weeks. I was summoned for statements, combed through endless contracts I'd never agreed to. And each time my name appeared on a document, my stomach turned. My savings bled out in legal fees. Then came the final blow. I lost my job. Officially, the reason was department restructuring. Unofficially, my manager pulled me aside and said, "The press around your family is distracting. We need stability right now." That same week, a business magazine published an article titled "The Siblings Sinking the Startup" with my photo, cropped from a family barbecue right beside Nathan's. The headline under it read, "From backup plan to liability." I stopped going out. My phone buzzed with pity texts from acquaintances I barely knew. "Hang in there. Things will turn around." But none from my family. One night, I stood on the balcony of my tiny apartment, 18th floor. The city glittered below like a distant universe I didn't belong to. I had a draft message open on my phone. "Everyone will be better off without me." My finger hovered over the send button. Then a small sound broke through the noise in my head, a whimper. I turned. My neighbour's dog, a scruffy little terrier named Max, was pawing at the railing, eyes wide. I'd been dog-sitting him while she worked late. His tail wagged hesitantly, like he knew something was wrong. I dropped the phone, sank to my knees, and buried my face in his fur. The message never went out. The next morning, I sat on the floor with a half-cold cup of coffee and stared at my laptop. My mind was numb, but somewhere in the static, a single thought surfaced. If they're going to laugh at me, I might as well give them a story worth watching. I opened Google. My fingers typed almost on their own. How to start a business with $0. Cliffhanger 5. I didn't know it then, but that search would be the first step toward burning the script my family had written for me. I disappeared for 21 days, not literally, just from the world that had known me. I locked myself in my apartment. My fridge was almost empty, my pantry stocked with instant noodles. I rationed my days between cheap coffee, laptop screen, and the quiet hum of my own thoughts. I created an anonymous blog. No name, no photo, just a plain header. Failed but not finished. I wrote about everything. The humiliation of being the family backup plan. The sting of being paraded as a prop. The legal traps I hadn't seen coming. The suffocating pressure of being supportive at my own expense. I didn't expect anyone to read it. But somehow people did. At first it was a handful of comments. I thought I was the only one. My parents did the same thing to me. Following, please don't stop. Then dozens, then hundreds, thousands of views. Thousands of people who had been sidelined in their own families, who'd been told to be grateful for scraps of recognition. I didn't know any of them personally, but they felt closer than my own family. They didn't want me to play a role. They wanted me to speak the truth. Every post I wrote became sharper. I wasn't asking for validation anymore. I was building something else. On the 21st day, I posted an entry titled, "What happens if the backup plan refuses to wait?" It went viral in a corner of the internet I'd never reached before. That's when I saw it. A comment, short, simple. "You should make an app. I'll invest." At first, I laughed. I'd seen plenty of sarcastic comments like that, but this one had a username I recognised, not from my readers, but from the business pages Nathan used to obsess over. It belonged to a competitor, someone who had publicly criticised Nathan's company 6 months earlier. Cliffhanger 6. I stared at the comment, my heart pounding. If this was real, it wasn't just an investment, it was a declaration of war. And they wanted me to be the weapon. The comment from Nathan's competitor sat on my screen for hours before I replied. I expected a trap, some backhanded way to humiliate me further, but the response I got was professional, straightforward, and, for the first time in months, respectful. 2 days later, I was on a Zoom call with a woman named Vanessa Reed, a venture capitalist who had built her own empire after being pushed out of her family's company. "I read your blog," she said, her voice steady. "It's raw, it's furious, but more than that, it's smart. You have insight. Most people are too scared to share. You're not a liability, Claire. You're a brand." No one had ever said that to me before. Vanessa wired the first seed investment that week. With that funding, my app took shape. It wasn't flashy. The interface was simple, almost stark, but its function was razor sharp. A platform to help young professionals disentangle themselves from toxic family expectations, legal resources, financial literacy, emotional support networks. I named it Breakline because sometimes you don't fix the cracks, you walk away from them. At first, I kept my name off the project. But then Vanessa called me one night. "You're missing the point," she said. "Your story is the product. You don't need to hide anymore." That night, I posted my first video in months. My face filled the screen. I didn't smile. "I used to be the backup plan," I said. "Now I'm building something so no one else has to be." I ended it with the hashtag that had once mocked me, on to backup plan no more. The response was overwhelming. People who had laughed at me before were now sharing the video in solidarity. Messages poured in, stories of siblings left behind, daughters overlooked, sons dismissed. For the first time, the noise online didn't feel like a storm. It felt like a chorus. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from Forbes. Subject: 30 under 30 interview request. They wanted to feature me in the upcoming list, but there was a condition. "We'd like to hear the full story," the editor wrote. "The truth behind your family dynamic." Our readers will connect with your resilience. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to protect myself from the fallout. Another part wanted to burn the silence to the ground. Cliffhanger 7. I closed my laptop without replying. Not yet. With the attention growing, I knew I couldn't leave my name undefended. I hired a lawyer, not to fight lawsuits this time, but to protect my personal brand. We combed through every article, every photo, every podcast clip. I sent takedown notices for anything that misrepresented me. My image wasn't free family property anymore. Word got back to my parents. One afternoon, my father called. His voice was warm, calculated. "Claire, why are you making this adversarial? We're family. Come home. Let's work this out together." For the first time, my hands didn't shake when I answered. "No, Dad, I'm not coming home, not like that." There was silence on the line, heavy and unfamiliar. My mother called the next day. She cried, something I'd never heard her do for me before. "We can fix this. We just need to show the world we're united." I took a breath. I don't need unity for the cameras. I need honesty, and you're not ready for that. That was the last time we spoke that month. The day I finalised my personal brand separation, I felt something lift off me. I wasn't dependent on their approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for a role to be handed to me. In a video update to my followers, I said, "I don't need to be the main character in their story because I am the movie." The comment section exploded. People made fan edits of the quote. The hashtag trended for days. But Nathan wasn't done. The morning Forbes was set to announce the 30 under 30 list. My notifications blew up. Nathan had posted a video. It was slick, professional, dripping with passive-aggressive charm. He implied my success was built on resources borrowed from him. He hinted at family tensions and misunderstandings without naming names. And the comments, half of them were defending me. The other half were calling for my receipts. Cliffhanger 8. I stared at the screen. Forbes' announcement was in hours. Nathan had just thrown down a challenge. And I'd have to decide whether to answer. The morning of the Forbes announcement, my inbox and phone were a mess. Nathan's misunderstanding video had done exactly what he wanted. It split the conversation. Half the comments were supportive. "Don't let him gaslight you, Claire." The other half demanded transparency. Vanessa called me. "He's setting the narrative before you get a chance to. If you don't respond, his version becomes the truth." I'd been quiet for too long. It was time to speak. That afternoon, I set up my phone in front of a blank wall. No PR team, no lighting rig, just me. I went live. "For years I've been called the backup plan," I began. "You've seen the jokes, the clips, the memes. What you haven't seen is what happens when the cameras aren't rolling." I pulled up a series of short videos, footage I'd saved over the years. Not because I'd planned this moment, but because I'd learned to keep records. Clips of family dinners where every achievement of mine was brushed aside. Footage of podcast recordings cut before I spoke. A video of Dad rehearsing lines before praising Nathan on camera. A recording of Mom telling me, "Keep it light, Claire. No one wants to hear about your projects." And then the emails. Screenshots of Nathan using my name to secure deals. Copies of legal letters blaming me for his mismanagement. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about truth. And it's about not letting someone else write your story for you." The live stream blew up. Within an hour, Justice for Claire was trending above Nathan's video. The Matthews family moved fast. 2 days later, they held a press conference. My father stood at the podium, Nathan and Mom flanking him. He smiled, that polished smile he used for donors and press. "Our family has always supported each other," he said. "Claire is mistaken. We're saddened by her public comments. We hope to resolve this privately." They hadn't learned. Minutes later, I released another video, this time showing the PR plan from Dad's iPad. The section labelled Claire, positioning, the bullet points about keeping me sympathetic but non-threatening. The internet didn't just turn, it roared. Cliffhanger 9. That night, an anonymous email slid into my inbox. Subject: "You're not the only one." Body: "I'm your father's other child. Everything will make sense soon." For a moment, I just stared at it. It could have been a prank. It could have been fake. But the way my pulse spiked told me part of me already believed it. I didn't respond, not yet. As the weeks passed, the Matthews name began to fracture. Nathan was quietly removed from 2 major investments. Dad's charity board suspended him pending review. Mum gave a tearful interview, apologising for any misunderstanding. But even through the screen, I could see it wasn't about me. It was about damage control. I didn't respond to her either. Then came the Forbes gala. I walked into the venue in a dress I'd bought myself, paid for with money my family hadn't touched. I wasn't here as anyone's accessory. I wasn't here as anyone's sister. In the green room, screens showed the live broadcast. My segment was coming up. My name was about to be read alongside people who had built themselves from the ground up. Nathan wasn't on the list. As I waited backstage, I thought about the anonymous email again, about all the questions it opened, but tonight wasn't about them. It wasn't about my father. It wasn't about Nathan. It wasn't about my mother's apology. It was about the fact that I had gotten here despite them. My segment started. My video played. Clips of the app, the users, the communities it had helped. Then my face, smiling in a way I hadn't smiled in years, unafraid. I stepped toward the curtain, ready to walk on stage. That's when a reporter, standing near the entrance, turned and called out, "If you could choose again, would you still want to be the backup plan?" I stopped. I smiled. I didn't answer. Cliffhanger 10, I stepped onto the stage instead, letting the question hang unanswered in the air. Because some stories don't need words to finish them. The Forbes gala ended with polite applause, photos, and champagne. But I walked out feeling something different, something deeper than celebration. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was running from the backup plan label. I felt like I'd stepped into something bigger, something that didn't require comparison at all. In the weeks that followed, the media cycle moved on to new scandals. Nathan's name still surfaced now and then, but less and less as his investments quietly unravelled. My parents stayed out of sight, their public statements dwindling into silence. I didn't chase them. Instead, I turned my focus to the messages filling my inbox. Hundreds of people, mostly young, who saw themselves in my story. They weren't asking for a spectacle. They were asking for help. That's how From the Shadows was born. It started as a side project, a fund to provide legal aid, therapy grants, and career mentorship to people trying to escape toxic family dynamics. But with the same network that had elevated Breakline, it grew quickly. Vanessa was the first to contribute seed money. Others followed. Soon we had enough to launch publicly. "This isn't about revenge," I said at the launch event. This is about giving people the tools I wish I'd had 10 years ago. The response was overwhelming. People didn't just donate, they shared their own stories. And for the first time, I realized that what I'd built wasn't just a company or a movement. It was a lifeline. One night, as I reviewed grant applications, I saw an unfamiliar email address pop up in my inbox. Subject, no cameras, no excuses. It was from Nathan. The message was short. I'm sorry for everything. I can't undo it, but I can tell you I finally understand. I hope that matters, even if no one else knows. I read it twice, 3 times. It wasn't a press statement. It wasn't crafted for PR. It was clumsy, imperfect, and real. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because there was nothing to negotiate. His apology wasn't a currency I needed. A week later, a TikTok surfaced that caught me off guard. Someone had spliced together 2 clips. The first was me, years ago, sitting alone in my dim apartment after the backup plan video had gone viral. My face was streaked with tears I hadn't noticed were visible on screen. The second clip was me now, standing on the Forbes stage, smiling, confident. The caption read, "Growth, pain, proof." It exploded online. Comments flooded in. This made me cry. She didn't just survive, she transformed. This is what healing looks like. I didn't watch it twice. Some moments deserve to live in other people's eyes, not mine. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of quiet, not the tense silence of being ignored, not the heavy silence of unspoken anger. This was something else, freedom. My mother called once, just once. Her voice was careful, brittle. "Claire, I'm sorry for what you went through. I didn't know it would get this far." I could hear the tremor, not of regret, but of someone standing on a crumbling stage. I listened, and then I said, "I know." She waited, maybe expecting absolution, but I didn't give it, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need her validation anymore. We hung up. One evening I sat by my apartment window, the city lights stretching out below me. My laptop rested on my knees. I opened my blog, the one that had started all of this. The cursor blinked on an empty page. I began to type. They said I was a backup plan. I became the blueprint. I didn't post it right away. I just sat there, letting the words breathe in the quiet. Somewhere in the city, people were still talking about the scandal, about the Forbes list, about my family. But for the first time, none of it felt like it belonged to me. What belonged to me was this moment. The stillness, the window, the truth I carried that didn't require anyone else's approval. The next morning, I pressed publish, not for closure, not for applause, but because it was the final page of a story that had never really been about revenge. It was about freedom,